Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Warriors Stock Report. Tim Bontemps, senior beer writer here in New York, Anthony Slater, and a very friendly neighborhood Chase Center uh, worker in the background briefly. Hello, Slater. Um,
This is the life late in arenas. What you're not seeing in front of me, in front of my laptop, is the 1975 Living Warriors, championship Warriors, including Rick Barry, are doing like a post game Q&A right now. Bob Fitzgerald's down there, and Rick Barry claimed pregame that their win in the finals in 1975 was the greatest upset in American sports history. So it was
sounds like a Rick Barry comment. It was cool to see those guys get honored. Obviously, uh, Al Attles and Nate Thurman, among others, unfortunately not around to celebrate that 50th anniversary of what was a pretty iconic championship team with one of the great players of all time in Rick Barry. We saw one of the great players of all time in Steph Curry have another great game on Friday night, but that was not enough to beat Caleb Love and the Portland Trailblazers
Caleb Love.
as we uh, as we cap a week for the Warriors. Last time we talked, things were looking a lot different for the Warriors. I believe it was after the incredible first game in San Antonio, not even before the incredible second game in San
Yeah.
Antonio. Warriors leave Texas. They're feeling great. They get back-to-back wins against the Spurs. And then what do? They go to Orlando and lose. They go to Miami and lose. Then they come home and lose to Portland, have Al Horford get killed on the boards. Jimmy Butler saying they don't guard anybody. Once again, the roller coaster of the Warriors continues.
Average team. Average team. 9-9.
Wow. Headline. There's the headline
Well,
podcast.
that's
Warriors,
what they are right
average
now.
team. They
That's
are a
what they are
500
right
team.
now.
9-9. 9-9 through
Yeah.
18 games.
And, I can hear them a little bit on the idea of like give them some practices, which they haven't been able to have, give them some more home games, although they got one tonight and lost it. But, they were 5-0 at home prior to this. Now they're 5-1, but only 6 home games and 12 road games. Clearly, there's been some attrition for an older team that this is maybe the worst part of their schedule, which typically in the NBA means you will be rewarded with soft parts of the schedule, which they're about to get right. 2 days off this weekend and a Jazz team in here on Monday should win that. But at the same time, like it's you know it's disappointing. I see Al Horford, by the way, walking not with that bad of a limp right now. He just walked out to shake some hands with some people. So there's
Well,
a
for
little break.
people that are watching and don't know,
Yes.
Al Horford left the game with right hamstring tightness. Now, I will just
Yes.
say it's always concerning at this point if anybody leaves a game with a muscle injury or muscle tightness like that. It's especially concerning one of the oldest players in the league leaves a game with muscle tightness. We'll see how long Al Horford is out, but one of the stories of this game was 21 offensive rebounds for the Blazers, a 20 rebound advantage overall. Robert Williams back healthy again, had 11 boards off the bench. Donovan Clingan had 5 offensive rebounds. Tamani Kamara had 5 offensive rebounds. Those three guys had 13 between them, and the Warriors had 9. And, when you look at the way this game played out, that played a very significant part in the Warriors losing this game. 52% defensive rebound rate, 47% offensive rebound rate for Portland. That's just not going to get it done. And Steve Kerr talked. You asked him after the game about having to play with two bigs. He said they might have to play with two bigs. And like you said, we're talking about a team that is 9-9, has had some very high highs and has had some pretty low lows and has some pretty real flaws. And I
Well, let's talk
they
about
are a
the two
team
bigs
that's
though.
yeah.
Let's
Go
talk
for it.
about the two bigs because, Will Richard played, I think, 9 minutes tonight. He didn't start in the second half. That lineup, it collectively, that 5-man group has not been great. I'll look at the numbers in a second of exactly what it's been. But he shifted to the bigger, two big type of lineups in the second half. And, the big options are either Al Horford, who, we'll see what happens with the hamstring. I mean, he would have, I think, theoretically closed in the fourth tonight. But then the other two options are recent second round picks who, you give some credit for the Warriors for finding those guys, but that's still like, you know, Robert Williams is coming off the bench for Portland tonight, right? Donovan Clingan's in the starting lineup. We're talking about a lottery pick, one of the better shot blockers in the league, big guys. Whereas Trace Jackson Davis, when he's next to Draymond, well, that's the spacing issues that come with the team. Quentin Post can hit some threes, although he hasn't been shooting it that well this season. And he's bigger, but he's not a bruising 7-footer. So it's not like you can match. So, they got the Rockets coming here next Wednesday, showcase game. I think it's a cup game, but it's like a triple header. What's the Rockets like rebound percentage right now? It's like
They're
offensive
over
rebound.
40. They're over 40% at least coming into today's game, which would be the best in the last 30 years in the league.
Yeah, I mean that talk about a clash of styles. And again, I mean they played small and beat that Rockets team. Not the Durant version of that Rockets team, but a big Rockets team that went double
Mm-hmm.
big in the first round. And they found ways. And one of the talking points post game you mentioned Jimmy Butler was it wasn't just they were pummeled by big centers inside. It was like they were getting blown by on the perimeter, and then the defense is breaking down, and dudes are able to run free for offensive rebounds. And they keep pointing to the fact that they're not staying in front of guys on the perimeter, which if you're going to be small, if you're going to have lack of rim protection, if you're going to be, outmanned on the glass, you can't also just be getting blown by to the rim.
Well, and that's something we've talked about a lot. This team doesn't have a ton of on-ball juice defensively, really. If you have Steph Curry out there, Jimmy Butler's fine in those spots, but he's picking his spots a bit at this point in his career. And then Podziemski is okay, but not like a lockdown guy. So you run down the list and, you've got to be on a string. You've got to be playing well collectively together. And, again, like you look at they gave up a 128 offensive rating to a Portland team that started City Sissoko, didn't have Shaedon Sharpe, didn't have Drew Holiday, and had Caleb Love go for 26 off the bench with 6 threes. Like it's not acceptable if you're going to try to be a team that's going to be a top 6 team in the West to lose a home game where you're giving up a $128 offensive rating to a limited Blazers team, like not even a normal Blazers team.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they have now what 3, 4, 5 like pretty bad losses on their resume early this season. I mean, the one
And they've
at the
got 3 or 4 or 5 pretty good wins, which again goes back to your point of like when they're dialed in, they could be very good. But when they're not dialed in, they could be pretty bad. And that can serve you well on a night-to-night basis across the 82. But we are, as you said, yes, the schedule's worked against them. Yes, they've had some injury hiccups here and there. Obviously, Kuminga's out right now with the knee issue. But they are not looking like a team that can string together 6 weeks of good basketball to be in the conference finals against the Thunder, presumably in the Western Conference playoffs with a chance to go to the finals, which is the position the Warriors came into the season thinking they had a realistic chance to be.
Yeah, I think this is the problem of their last. Well, they've lost 3 in a row, but really the Orlando loss and the one I'm talking about tonight. You had a good Steph Curry, really in both. Really, I would say you had a good Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler. I thought Butler really brought it tonight in important moments. And Steph was like 38 on 14 of 25, something like that tonight. Like,
Yeah, Jimmy had 6 of their 9 offensive rebounds in this game and had no
yeah,
turnovers and it was flying around.
he was putting the pedal down in the fourth. So you have Jimmy putting the pedal down, and you have Steph going for 38 on 14 to 25, and you lose to the Blazers at home. That's to me like the greater concern is like you kind of got your fastball from your
Yep.
2 stars, and you're not getting that one.
And it wasn't enough. Yeah. It wasn't enough to beat Caleb Love. Like that's a pretty sobering statement on where this team is at. Now, you wrote a big story on Thursday about Jonathan Kuminga. We're once again in the Jonathan Kuminga zone. He is hurt. He's got this bilateral knee tendonitis. But he was locked in the starting lineup. We talked about that. Then he was not in the starting lineup. Now there's all this debate about what his role is with the team. It was a very good story. If you haven't read it, you should go read it. Jimmy Butler had a lot of very interesting things to say. However, I think this entire discussion only reinforces what we were just talking about, because the fact that Jonathan Kuminga remains such a integral part of what this team is, whether it's on the court or via trade, I think it sums up that they're just not that good. Because if they were better, all of this would be an ancillary story. But it's not an ancillary story
Yeah.
because they're 9-9 and they're losing these games, and therefore all of the things going on with Kuminga get that much more amplified than if they were 12-6 and had beat, they'd won the Minnesota, they'd won this Portland game, and they'd won the Indiana game, and they'd won the Milwaukee game. Just those three games. Even forget Orlando, which is playing better. They win those three games that they should have won. They're 12-6, and this all looks a lot different than it does right now.
And it goes back to the summer where I think there was definitely a lot of eye rolling or head scratching on why Jonathan Kuminga was such a big story. And there was multiple reasons why, empty, dry
Yeah,
summer.
we've done that before. We could skip that.
So I guess to my overall point though, it's like because you've always felt coming out of that playoffs, it was like, they've gotten the main secondary piece next to Steph, which was Jimmy Butler, which is, if you go back to the middle of last season, that's what they were missing. It was like, you need the co-star. You got the co-star. But I think you left the playoffs, particularly looking at the Thunder and the Nuggets and looking at what the Warriors were. And it was like, they're a player away. They're a significant player away. Not a number 2, but like kind of a number 4 or 5 at least, like a good number 4 or 5 on like a, title type team.
Yep.
And the whole story was it either Jonathan Kuminga needs to turn into that or Jonathan Kuminga needs to turn into that via trade, basically. And then you saw the offers, and it was like Malik Monk, no, that ain't checking that box. Royce O'Neal, no, that ain't checking that box. And again, we're part of the deal that they signed was kicking the can down the road, and this idea that come January 15th through February 6th or whatever the deadline is their window to maybe explore that again. But it was always going to be an awkward couple months, and it is, and it has been. And
it's a lot more awkward when you're losing games you should be losing, right? Because again, like at the end of last season, when they were whatever they were, when Jimmy and Steph were playing together 22-5 or whatever the record was the second half of last season, Kuminga was hurt. Then Kuminga came back. He wasn't really playing. Didn't really matter because they were winning all the time, right? And then that stuff sort of gets pushed to the side. But when you're losing games like this, and the team is struggling and it's got real flaws, all this stuff comes to the fore and matters a lot more. And it's why we're now in another spin cycle of the Jonathan Kuminga story and where do things sit and what's going to happen. And you've got, Jimmy and Draymond sort of publicly saying they need to play the guy more and have him have a solid, defined role when he's out there with them. When he gets back from this knee issue. I think it's just further proof that this story is not going away, like you said, between now and February. And frankly, I wrote a piece on all 30 teams on Friday, and my note on the Warriors. So the thing I learned over the first month is the situation remains uncomfortable, and I'm not sure there's going to be a solve because, as we've talked about before, when you really start to drill down on what possible Jonathan Kuminga trades are, there aren't a lot that make sense. And the Warriors aren't just going to give him away. They're not just going to trade him for a mediocre piece. Or some guy that makes money long-term that they don't really like to get a pick, I don't think. So when you look at that, I think by the day, it's looking more and more likely that this ends up being another thing that stretches all the way to next summer, which I'm sure you're thrilled about. And we're going to be doing this song and dance for a while.
I've joked with many people involved in this, many of the central figures within this, that we're going to be sitting here in 2035 and you're like 17 of Jonathan Kuminga's tenure with the Warriors.
I think in July of 26, we could very well be sitting here in the same place, or at draft night.
It's tongue in cheek, but you know what I mean. Like this is
yes,
and we don't have to go blow by blow, but like it's not like Jonathan Kuminga necessarily was the one asking for this too. You know what I mean? Like, he clearly spent the summer itching to explore some potential other options. So I think, the other part, the heart of the discomfort is like it's, you don't want to say held hostage is too big of a like phrase.
Well, no, at the end of the day, nobody really wants him that badly either. Like there's teams that are interested, but there's nobody that's super interested to really bowl the Warriors over. And the Warriors don't have a player that it's going to be hard, I think, to find a player that the Warriors are going to be excited enough to move pieces for. And look, here's the other thing. If the Warriors remain sitting at 500, let's say they are 2 games over 500 in mid-January, like you're not trading Jonathan Kuminga for some win now thing at the expense of the future if the team is
But that's where it gets
500 and
really,
sitting in ninth in the
yeah.
West, for example. You
That's
know,
where it gets awkward, or that's where just like it becomes a, because it's getting really late in the Steph Curry era and the Steve Kerr era, and this
yes,
Jimmy Butler core. And again, I don't think they're saying, "Hey, here's Kuminga and all of the picks" or something like that. But I think there will be some itching, to like
I just think it's
attempt
hard.
to.
I just think that's going to be limited if they're. I mean, look, we've talked about it some. We focus on the Warriors, and we're going to talk a little bit about your favorite team, the Kings, in a bit. But the Thunder are now, I believe,
Potential
16 and
suitor, potential suitor,
potential suitor for what?
Kuminga.
Oh, get out of here.
They were the hottest on his case this summer.
Okay, sure.
I mean,
Oh, you're talking about the Kings. I think you meant the
yeah.
Thunder. Oh, sorry. You
Oh
didn't.
no, no,
Oh,
no, 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 not the
yeah.
Thunder. The
Okay.
King.
Yes. You were very excited about the Kings and didn't hear what I said, which is the Thunder are 16-1.
Yeah.
They were down 10 or 12 in the third quarter against Utah tonight. I was channel surfing on my house watching games, and they went on, I believe, a 30-2 run in about 5 minutes and won the game going away. I know the Jazz aren't very good, but the Thunder look like they're going to just stampede through everyone. So if the Thunder are on their way to winning 75 games, which I don't think is insane at this point, and the Warriors are, 28-27 on January 20th, like I'm all for trying to maximize Steph as much as you can, but it gets hard to justify that if you're 25 games behind the team in first place in the West. So,
I will
part
say,
of this, I think, is the
yes,
team has to show it's worth investing in. And for the moments, there have been moments, the Denver game, the San Antonio games, where you can look at it and say, this team is worth investing in. They could give the Thunder a tough time in a series. Then you look at the Thunder game where they got, like many teams, they saw what the gap is, and you look at some of these desultory losses,
they were
and
humbled
it's
post game in Oklahoma City. They like that's as like you saw the post game comments, but even going to the San Antonio game, I mean, Jimmy Butler used that word, and Jimmy Butler's like pretty careful and like
well,
careful to like dole out exterior credit to teams, and he said
if
how much of a humbling it was to watch the Thunder do what they did
if you have
without
a
Jalen.
veteran, if you have a veteran team, yes, that's again, Jalen Williams has yet to play this season, and they have a plus 15 net rating. Like they are just curb stomping everyone. And if you're a team full of veteran players, which the Warriors are, right? It's very hard for those guys to delude themselves about where they're at. Doesn't mean they're not supremely confident, because they are supremely confident, like especially the 3 stars on the Warriors. Those guys have made careers off being doubted and being supremely confident in their abilities, all in different ways. But that's, all 3 of those guys, Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond, have been underdogs for large portions of their careers. And at the same time, those guys are all realistic. And you go into that Thunder game and you get obliterated by them. And, you couple that with losing these games to bad teams that you can't afford to lose. I mean, we've talked about this since the start of the season. This team cannot afford to be in the play-in. They probably can't afford to not be a home court advantage team in the first round. Like they needed to be a team that was in position to have as easy a path as they possibly could until they had to play the really good teams. And right now, you're sitting here, they're in the play-in. Yes, they've had a brutal stretch of the schedule. It'll probably get easier, but they've made life difficult on themselves. And I do think it is something that bears watching as we get closer to the trade deadline, in that if they just cannot make meaningful strides forward, and they can't get well above 500, I do think it makes it harder to make a Kuminga trade for a win now piece. And I do think it makes it harder to really sell out for the 26th season.
Yeah, we'll just say it's and this is the last thing I want to say on it, but like at some point, and I probably would have said this 8 times already in this saga, but like they got to make some type of choice on him, even if it's flipping him for something that's like relative equivalent value or
Well, I think that
yeah.
choice, I think the deadline for that choice is this summer. I
Yeah.
think is what it is because it's hard to make trades for big name players in season, especially when you're $5 below the second apron, which I'm being a little sarcastic, but the Warriors are basically bang up against the second apron. Makes it very difficult to make moves right now. Um, I would say that one way or the other, there will be a hard decision on the Jonathan Kuminga situation this summer because I think the Warriors will have to make moves with their roster um, this summer coming up. But I think they have to be good enough on the court to justify doing something, especially when there could be big name players available next summer that they're going to want to have all their ammo to go get, and
Yeah.
giving up some of it in the season to go get some sort of like this is a made up thing, but like Denver trading Michael Porter Jr. in an unprotected first for Cam Johnson, right? Like whatever the merits of that trade are, and obviously it saved Denver money, but in
You can just,
theory,
it's easier to do in the
well,
summer.
if you just think, I wasn't even saying it that way, but like if the Warriors take one of their limited firsts with Jonathan Kuminga and go get a player that helps them get better today, right? That hurts their chances of getting a bigger fish in the summer. And so I do think you have to weigh what is the opportunity cost that's being lost by doing that. And I think it's a much harder probability to weigh if the team is hovering around 500 and losing games it should win on a regular basis than if the Warriors are in third in the West. The Warriors are third in the West. It's very easy to say, hey, we might not get another chance like this with Steph. Let's let's get some guys. Let's try to help them. Let's see if we can stun the Thunder and win. I think it's a lot harder if you're in the play-in to do that, which is I think the overriding question. And like tonight, I'm looking I'm looking at our analytics page, and I don't think this has tonight's win in here yet or games in here yet. Which, oh no, I take that. Well, that's at 10 o'clock last night. So this is before the Warriors game. Uh, so the Warriors, I think, would have been projected to win that game. However, as of right now, Golden State is projected to finish seventh in the West as the seventh team over 500, which would have them in the play-in, which would have them in the first round playing either Houston or Denver. And that sets you up to have to beat, in theory, Houston, Golden State, or Minnesota, and Oklahoma City to make the finals. That's exactly the kind of path they could not afford to be trying to go down.
I want to this week, the next time we talk, I think is going to be, well, it'll probably be the homestand is so spread out. Next time we talk, it'll still be on the homestand. But this homestand, I'm interested in for two reasons. Number one,
We'll rip through the homestand first for people.
yeah,
Who are they
well,
playing?
I will get there in a second, but they're about to get two off days, Saturday, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like Kerr said he was hopeful Kuminga could practice Sunday, which theoretically would set him up maybe for a Monday return. They're playing the Jazz, two off days, and then the Jazz. You would, if they are who they say they are early in the season, you come out and you have like a pretty forceful performance against the Jazz team at a time you need it at home. But then, you get an off day in that marquee Houston game, which again, they present, matchup problems, but they beat them in the playoffs last year. And then I believe it's two more off days and then the Pelicans.
Yep.
And then two more off days in the Thunder. And just there's going to be a lot of practices within there. There's going to be a lot of rest for these older guys, and it seems to be a little bit of a foot down moment for them, where you got two teams that you definitely should beat, and then two teams that are kind of in that tier above you, two tiers in the Thunder's case. And I
Yeah.
think just considering maybe a little bit of urgency of the moment and the practice time and just the seriousness that and focus that should come with it, like. But at the end of those four games, even if they go 2-2, but it's like you whooped the Pelicans and Jazz, and you were really close competitive with the Rockets and Thunder, maybe you'll feel okay. I just think we'll know a little bit more about like, hey, was it maybe just how absurd the travel was early in the season, and now that they kind of got their feet under them, or is there like greater concerns?
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks. And, then they immediately go on an East Coast trip and go to Philly, Cleveland, back to back in Chicago, and then we go into the Cup games. So,
Eliminated from Vegas tonight, by the way. So the Warriors will not
Yes,
be in Vegas.
the NBA has gotten the Lakers there once, I think, first couple of years. Yeah, they won it obviously the first year, and are in pretty good position to get there, to get into the playoffs at least of it this year. They have to just win one more game next week against either the pretty rough Clippers. The Warriors can at least be happy they're not the Clippers, or the Mavericks. So we'll see if the league gets what they want with the Lakers
Best thing
into
going for
the
the
Cup
Warriors right
Finals.
now is the middle of the West is like it's pretty stinky right
Well,
now.
that is I mean, we talked about this on the Hoop Collective this week a little bit. It is remarkable how bad the West is from 8 down. And Phoenix had an incredible win. I don't know if you saw what happened in that game because you were covering your game, but
They
uh,
were down 8 with like a minute left and one.
they were down 8 with 49 seconds to go and had a chance to take the lead with 18 seconds left before Dylan Brooks committed a dumb foul. I'm sure you're surprised to hear that. But then they win the game after Anthony Edwards missed 2 free throws. Kyle Gillespie hit a floater, scored 9 straight points to win the game in the final 45 seconds. They're still projected to finish 8th with 39 wins. Like the bottom of the West, if you said start the season, 8th place at the end of the regular season in the East is going to have 39 wins, there'd be a straight clown parade on the Eastern Conference and how terrible it is. So it is remarkable how down the bottom of the West is, which is good for Golden State because they do have some time to sort things out and get themselves right. But on the other hand, they are quickly losing ground on San Antonio, which keeps winning without Victor, on Houston, on Minnesota, on some of these other teams. And, obviously it'd be nice if the Warriors could get into the top
Yeah.
4, but they desperately need to get into the top 6 and
And the
just get
top
that
six
week
is
off.
is the top 6 is definitely there because like you said, Phoenix is in the 6 right now. But I think greater than the standings concern is more just the gap that it feels like when you
Yes.
watch the Nuggets, when you watch the Thunder, when you watch the Rockets right now, and then you watch the Warriors. So like that to me is the greater concern because I think standings wise, you're like, man, they still set up pretty good to get a top 6 seed if they just
Yes.
get right.
Well, and
But
that's
it's
to your point where if you come out of that 4-game homestand and they're 11-11 and they lose comfortably to Houston and Oklahoma City, then you're a quarter of the way through the season and it quickly becomes hard to see them as a team that can really be a threat. And that opens up all sorts of other questions about, again, what happens at the trade deadline? What do they do next summer? What is the future of the group? Et cetera, et cetera. Like a lot of things come on the table if they lose those games. So like you said, that game next Wednesday, we'll probably do this after the game next Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve, Rockets Warriors. It's a huge game. It's on our air. Like that's a massive game for Golden State to take care of. So we'll see if they could do it. There was also other news with the Warriors today. Chris DeMarco, who's been with the Warriors for well over a decade, a guy we both know very well, got announced. Well, I shouldn't say got announced. It hasn't been announced yet, but he will be the next head coach of the New York Liberty, the latest NBA assistant coach to go to the W. You had Nate Tibbetts, who was in the finals with the Phoenix Mercury this year. You had Becky Hammon, who won another WNBA title with the Las Vegas Aces. I think it's her third, I want to say, with the Aces. Natalie Nakase, obviously with the Valkyries in Golden State. She did a remarkable job with an expansion team this year. This has been a trend around the league, seeing people come over from the NBA to the W side. But Slater, obviously, there was a lot of talk about DeMarco today, and the job that Chris has done with the Warriors for a long time. For people that don't know much about him, what has his path with the team been, and what is his role now, and where's the team going from here now that he's at some point this season going to be heading out here to where I'm at?
Longest tenured on the staff, predates Steve Kerr. He's part of Mark Jackson's staff. Video guy, PD guy. At one point, he was a player development, lead, and then really over the last half decade or so has shifted into like defensive right-hand man for the defensive coordinators. And you're talking about, next to Mike Brown as the defensive strategist on the 22 title team, next to Kenny Atkinson for the next couple of years. Right now, sitting now front of the bench this year for the first time, really working through the defense with Jerry Stackhouse. So from a strategic standpoint, they are losing one of their, defensive, game planners. And then, player development wise, Klay Thompson is why he coached Team Bahamas, right? His relationship with Klay Thompson to Jordan Poole to Draymond and a lot of these guys. But I would say Klay and Jordan Poole are the two he probably is known for working closest with. But look, he was coaching tonight. Sounds like he's got a little bit more time left with this team. It didn't blindside the Warriors. I reported on it today, but they were very much part of, in a lot of ways, helping Chris kind of get over the hump here, where Sabrina Ionescu called Steph to kind of pick his brain on him. You got to know Steve Kerr's, if you're listening to somebody on, your references list, he's going to be up there. So
Yes.
it's
Jonquel
something.
Jones and Buddy Hield have been tight since they were
Yes.
kids in the Bahamas. There's another connection there.
Yes. So yeah, exactly. It's going to hurt them from a defensive game planning perspective and just like a, stability of the staff perspective. Because like you said, since 2012, he's been here. But that's life in the NBA, as you know.
Yeah, and it's an incredible opportunity for Chris. I mean, the Liberty have a team that's got a chance to win the title. Obviously, we'll see what the new CBA looks like. We'll see if they can get Jonquel Jones and Brianna Stewart. Brianna's late here on the East Coast. Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu. I mean, basically, their whole team is free agents because basically the whole WNBA are free agents with the way things have broke with the new CBA coming in. It's going to change the salary rules. There was a lot of uncertainty about where things are going to land. But the Liberty under Joe Tsai, their owner, have invested a ton of money in the franchise. They obviously won the title last year. They should have a chance to win. It's a great opportunity for Chris. He did a great job with the Bahamian national team. Coach VJ Edgecombe, who was the third pick in the draft this year by Philly, has been off to a great start. Nearly got them into the Olympics. They lost in the final qualifier in Spain, beat Spain in Spain in the first game they played, and then eventually lost to them in the championship game of that qualifier, which is a heck of an accomplishment for the Bahamas to be that close to the Olympics. So, like I said, we've both known him a long time. It's a cool opportunity for him, and it will be interesting to see how the Warriors do adjust because, Cleveland is dealing with this with Alex Sarama, their assistant, going over to work with the Portland Fire with the expansion team. Steve Kerr, I think, talked about it before the game. It's a weird setup with the way the W schedule is. This is all happening in the middle of the NBA season. But it is something else that the Warriors are going to have to navigate. And he's a guy that has a long-standing relationship with Draymond and Steve and a lot of these guys, and now will not be there.
Yeah, for sure. And again, like I said, there's going to be a buffer period where they'll get, a transition plan kind of in place, particularly from a defensive perspective, but also he'll still be a voice in the room, for the near future, several weeks.
Well, and look, I mean, let's see if there's even a season to go back to right now. I expect the CBA to get done on the W side, but I would say the negotiations are not in a great place right now. And if they don't get done by the end of the month, there could be a lockout or a strike or something. So, I mean, if that happens, certainly there's not a lot of need for Chris to be going anywhere in the short term. So all of that will be stuff that the Warriors will have to address. There's a lot of things that have to be addressed, though, in Sacramento. The thing Slater likes to talk about.
You want to go Kings, or should we save Kings? Should we save Kings for next time?
I mean, we could talk about the Kings for a few minutes. I think there's going to be more to talk about with the Kings. The Kings,
8 straight double-digit losses.
Yeah, the Kings on Thursday night played a Memphis team that didn't have Jaren Jackson Jr., didn't have Ja Morant, even though Ja Morant has struggled pretty mightily this year. Didn't have Brandon Clark, among others. The Memphis Grizzlies injury report remains very long, and they lost by 41. And they gave up 136 offensive rating, and they gave up 42 assists on 50 made baskets. The Grizzlies had more assists than the Kings had made baskets in the game. It's not great. It's not great all around. What are the next steps that are going to be happening in Sacramento at this point? Where is this headed?
I'd say two things. I think if you take 2 steps back, it's not a bad thing for the Kings. I think a bottom 5 record potential top 5 pick, which is what you get for that, if the lottery ball's right, is like would be the best reward that they could possibly have right now because
Mm-hmm.
clearly we all know it's not going anywhere. They're not going to like recover and
No,
make a run at the play in or whatever.
no.
So like I don't think it's like horrible that that the record is what it is. What happens next? I mean, they listen. They listen on their guys, and they have most of their guys are on. I'm talking about their highly paid veterans are on contracts that are not that appealing, in the market. So
Yep.
it might be difficult to trade these guys. I think of them, DeMar DeRozan profiles to me as potentially the easiest to move because his contract is probably the easiest to move. I don't know that they're going to get much value, but I do believe opening up playing time for Nick Clifford and Keon Ellis and Keegan Murray's back now. Like to me, that's needs to slowly be the priority of a team that is heading towards a long rebuild, a difficult cleanup job. But now they have a front office who came in knowing that, and in some ways planning to execute that. They don't need to rush into any trades, but clearly they're going to be a deadline team that we'll be talking about plenty. And like I said, I think DeRozan is the name I would highlight at this current moment. But at this point, you don't need to panic trade because you're trying to quietly tank because you're losing every night innings.
I mean, that is certainly true. I'm just not sure if any of these guys are tradable, really. I would say DeMar is probably, to your point, the most tradable because he's making 24.5, but I
Yeah,
think
and it's
there's
10 million guaranteed next year.
yeah, but
Yeah.
but even just this year, like I think there's a very limited market for him. I would say, I mean, I could be wrong. I think there's no market for Domantas Sabonis, even if he comes back from this knee injury and he's healthy. I don't really see anybody rushing to trade for him. I don't see anybody rushing to trade for Zach LaVine making 47.4 and 48.9 the next 2 years because he's not getting that. I'd be pretty stunned if he doesn't pick that player option up for next year. Um, I don't really think there's going to be a lot of suitors for Malik Monk's, basically $60 million over the next 3 years. Again, I think his player option could easily get picked up in 2 years. Um, I don't think there's a lot of interest in Dennis Schroeder's 30 million the next 2 years, 14 and a half each year, basically. Um, I I'm just not
Uh,
sure what's going to
they
happen there.
they twisted themselves into this pretzel, and they just are going to have to eat it for a
Yeah, they
couple
got
years.
to deal with it. I mean, that's the thing. I think it's going
Which
to be a healthy dose of medicine if they are willing to take it. And like you said, getting a
I
high
think they
pick in
are.
this, well, getting a high
I
pick
think
in
they
this
are
year's
now.
draft, right? Let's see if
Yeah,
it stays that way.
that's the thing. It's like I think they are accepting of the current reality. My larger question over the next 3 years is like, can you be patient with it? It's gonna be, as somebody I go to a lot of Kings games, like it's gonna be depressing. And that's the type of stuff. You can look at what the smart, patient rebuild approach should take, but then you go to a March 11th Kings game when they're 27 games under 500, and the crowd who is like they're really into their team and they're going to be really upset about what it's gotten to, and they're going to voice it, and they're going to voice it while Vivek sits there courtside and is frustrated because they're giving up 42 second quarter points. Like those are the nights where the patience is always tested. And there's a lot of bad contracts across the league, so maybe there's going to be some like type of domino flopping over here. Who knows?
Uh,
I
I
don't even say that's a good idea, to be honest, but I
no,
just think
I
that's a
that's the thing. I think for his and this team looks miserable and they're playing miserably. And I mean, Doug Christie, I assume has to be pretty hot at this point based off how it's going, though who knows. But you look at their top five guys in Levine, Sabonis, DeRozan, Monk, and Schroeder, and I'm not sure there's interest around the league in any of them. So that's going to be, you know, they could just be sitting here with this team for the next couple of years it plus whoever they draft and
Yeah, I mean,
not really able to
if
do
that
much of
team
anything.
includes if that team includes AJ DeBonsa, you know what I mean? Like if
Well,
you
yes. I mean, that's the upside is for a team
that's
that I
it.
think has never picked. I mean, I shouldn't say that. They haven't picked that high too many times in the draft. Certainly, it'd be nice for them to get, Darren Peterson or AJ DeBansa or one of these guys. But yeah,
To me that's the season at this point. It's
it has to
getting more
be.
getting more minutes for the youth and hoping to luck out in the lottery.
Well, and if they can find any way to get off of any of
Yeah.
those guys for nothing, like I think they
Get off
have
the
to do
deals,
it.
yeah.
If they could do any trades for any of them for expiring contracts or minimal money back in the future.
But also, I mean, you were alluding to this, like, just you don't have to panic trade them either. You can just eat, take the medicine.
Well, I would be trading them just to get rid of the. I would say I wouldn't say it's a panic. I would say if they have the ability to get rid of them for any price that isn't costing them assets, they have to do it. And especially if they can get out of future money, they have to do it. Um, Kings fans are not going to like to hear that Domantas Sabonis in particular probably doesn't have much value, but I would be really surprised if he had any trade value in the league.
I think Kings fans at this point are open to hearing about anything right now. It's a
Well,
little bit. There's some unrest about just the
I mean, look,
bleakness of the situation.
it's pretty incredible that it wasn't long ago that they had De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton and traded Halliburton for Sabonis, which at the time I think a lot of people thought was a questionable trade, if not everybody. And even though it did lead to them having the nice series against the Warriors and the fun year that it had, to then a very short time later not have Mike Brown, not have De'Aaron Fox, and have this whole thing fall to where it is now, it's a pretty depressing sequence of events. And like you said, the question for a long time in Sacramento has been, can Vivek Ranadive be remotely patient with this team? And he's gone through a million execs, and he's gone through a million coaches, and they've had brief pockets of success. One brief pocket, really.
I was going to say, no S on pockets.
Yeah, they had the one brief pocket of success, and then almost immediately got rid of Mike Brown, and the whole thing is now careened back off a cliff, and they're going to have to start over. And I have a lot of sympathy for the Kings fans because they're some of the most loyal fans in the league, and they've been through a lot, and they still care a lot about that team and are very passionate about it, and it hasn't really netted them a lot. So,
On that note,
well, listen, nobody likes to talk about the Kings more than Slater. He perked right up when I said, "Do you want to touch on them on the pod?" Oh, yes, we got to talk about the Kings. So, there'll be more time to analyze the Kings trade assets. But thanks for sticking around with us for this week's edition of the Stock Report. We'll be back next week. Like I said, probably Wednesday night going into the Thanksgiving holiday, maybe Friday morning. We'll see. Maybe we'll wait and do a Friday morning, depending on where things sit. But either way, after this monumental game against Houston. But Slater, safe trip back to Sacktown. And thanks everybody for watching. And we'll talk to y'all again soon. Try to post at what I look like. Keep them going, try to wear, pull up all brains. Jimmy with the heat, I'm on fire. It's 88 over here,